The reason why I bring up this question is I want to sort of reflect on how much the space for emerging artists has grown in India since that period of time.
I kind of, feel the space has always existed. It's just not been part of the organized art industry. One, with the internet, that's changed a lot, because as much as you want, you can't gatekeep an artist anymore. You can't keep them hidden. You can't keep talent hidden.
You work with emerging artists, emerging artists that sometimes are showing their art for the very first time. A lot of galleries do offer support in terms of grants, residencies, but there are a lot of invisible support also that galleries offer. What does a gallery like yours, who works primarily with the upcoming artists, with the emerging artists, how do you go about that support?
I think we've just built a really good support system.
Yeah.
Where we do now have
People like Anika.
Yeah, we have.
Yeah.
And it started with a few people who really believed, I think, in what we do, not necessarily just the art we present. I think it's been twofold, right? I think sometimes someone may really like the work, but I think sometimes someone may just say, hey, I think this is important. Let me pick up a work that might be at an accessible price point because it's going to help the artist and the gallery to keep doing what they do. And I think people just buying into what we are trying to create as Method.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Don't Run Into Glass, a podcast hosted by the Citizen.in. I'm Gayati.
And I'm Anika.
And Anika, what are we chatting about today?
Today we are chatting with someone who runs an art gallery, someone who has been working with emerging artists, a rarity in this very prestigious blue chip world of, high art. Someone who I have had experience of working with very closely. And most importantly, someone who has been working with art but been very cause-oriented about it, been very proactive about giving back to the world, whether it's a world in crisis or it's helping out artists. It's someone who extends a huge support program in the past few years, and I have just absolutely admired their work. So we're going to talk to the founder of Method Art Gallery, Sahil Arora. Hi, Sahil.
Hey, Anika. Hi, Gayati.
Well, thanks for joining us because I know you have several exhibitions on currently that are also tugging away at precious time. But I have to say, again, I don't know why we are only recording episodes where I'm so out of my depth and it's all your world, Anika. But I have to say, I asked Anika to.
Anika's a bully.
Anika's a bully. But this episode was actually because I saw one of the Palestine.
This was her idea.
This is my idea. Because it's so rare, right? The art world in India is it's all like a copy paste of everything else. And I honestly feel like Method is a breath of fresh air. And I genuinely mean that. And what made me think that is also some of the Palestinian Gaza exhibits that you've done at a time that they were so crucial. Not very many galleries were talking about it. We know that art is such a political tool. People are too scared to really make obvious associations. So I do want to say thank you. Thank you for being that beacon of hope. But why couldn't you just take the easier way out? What is still keeping you so rooted to cause and crisis?
I don't know if it's the harder way in the sense of the easy way or the hard way, but I think if it's just important, it needs to be done. And also Emma's not here, but a lot of these initiatives are led by Emma. So a lot of the empathy, a lot of the sympathy, a lot of the awareness for me and for us to do these things as a gallery comes because of the work that she does as well, which is behind the scenes. And then the more you look at it, the more you just look at how relevant certain things are and how important it is to speak about them in that moment, to amplify a conversation, whether something is happening in India, whether something is happening internationally, whether it's Palestine, Gaza, whatever it may be. It's important to us, so we show it, or we'll exhibit it, or we'll work towards creating conversation around it, so I think that's really it.
But isn't that disruptive? I mean, as an outsider, is that disruptive in an art world that's so concerned with making sales and the business of it? Isn't that a disruptive concept?
I know. I would say that it is also an important thing that the art world needs to do. Protest art, art that speaks the truth, art that speaks to power, has always been something very important in the art world. But like, how has it been for you, Sahil, to kind of work in a marketplace where artists rely on you to actually sell their artwork so that they can make a livelihood, but at the same time you help them continue standing up for what they want to stand up for?
I think with a lot of the artists who create protest art, political art, or touch upon those themes, I think even they, to start with, know that it might not be the most market friendly art that they're making. So if you look at it as the journey of the art itself, I think it's being created without the motivation to sell it. And then we are presenting it without the motivation to sell it either. So then the financial equation just doesn't come into the picture a lot of times, at least with the decision to present it or to exhibit it or to show it. Touch wood, with a lot of the exhibitions we've done, we have got collector support, right? That helps us keep doing it, that helps the artists keep doing it. But it is harder to sell that stuff, right? Especially when it's work that's got something to do with a lot of the minority communities in India. That's a little bit harder, which tends to be most of the political and protest art anyway. But I think the intention is, if you're going to do that, you can't really look at it from the lens of sales. Over time, you find people who connect with it. You find other people who think it's important and who will also like proudly collect it and display it in their homes. So I think what we've realized is you just need to keep doing it, and the collectors will find you, you know, and it works out. It's worked out so far. There are some shows we've done where we've gone into it knowing that there is nothing for sale, right? So we did a show last year called The Future Will Remember. And it was almost like a memorial, right, of the Palestinians who had been martyred,
That
and their
was where
names
the
were.
bricks
That
were.
was the
That's
one
right.
with
Yeah.
that was
Yeah.
the one with the bricks, right? So the names and ages of the martyred Palestinians were etched into like small bricks and displayed. And um, we also didn't keep anything for sale over there.
Yeah.
So even if there were any inquiries or something, it just didn't feel right to be capitalizing or monetizing essentially the names of martyrs. So but there you just go in and say, hey, it's important to do this. You need to have this conversation now. There's a genocide happening. If you don't talk about it now, you can't talk about it from a historical perspective. Then it's history. It doesn't make sense. So the conversation needs to happen. Back then it needed to happen then. It still needs to happen even more now. But yeah, you just sometimes do those things and you say, okay, it's going to be an investment of so much. We may not recover it, but we are still going to do it. And the artists also know that when it happens.
I mean, that's commendable because I mean, and do you feel, look, even I'm in a profession where like your ethics or the need to do something like journalism, that's how
Hmm.
it originally started, right? Like,
Yeah.
you sort of give the marginalized a voice. That's
Hmm.
what a reporter is supposed to do. You're not supposed to think about whether the story sells, it's just about representing the voice of the voiceless. But somewhere the business comes in the way and it sort of steers you off course. And yet, method, even though you have like obviously your um, reasons for doing this so well
Hmm.
intact, and yet method has managed to grow over the last few years. Are you surprised by it, or is it just a happy coincidence, or are the
Um,
collectors really
Also, tell us
crucial to
how
that?
you've grown.
Yeah.
Like, what is the
How did you
establishment of
start?
method?
I've
Yeah.
been eating a lot. Um,
Anika.
Anika had other ways. But no, I think so. When I started Method, I still had like a side job, or maybe
Mm.
Method was my side thing when we started
Yeah.
back in
Yeah.
2019. I don't know which was the side piece and which wasn't. So I was consulting back then, and that was funding Method, right?
Method. Yeah.
Which in a way was really good because when we started Method, we started with no pressure to sell art.
Yeah.
So we could curate with complete freedom,
Yeah.
right? Like I can pick an artist that's political. It's okay if it doesn't sell, right? Because my consulting practice is covering Method's bills. We could do an artist who doesn't have a background in the arts, who's maybe from a design background, right? Who's not gone to art school, who's not done the residencies, but we love their work. And it's okay if it doesn't sell. So I think when we started Method in 2019, it was purely let's present artists and exhibitions that either we like or that really matter to us, and I think that spoiled us a little bit, because in the long run, it's something we've stuck to. So we even now we never look at an artist or a work or the concept for a show from the lens of how will it sell or not sell. It's just like, okay, we're going to do this and we'll see how it goes.
Mm.
We've had shows where almost nothing has sold, or maybe one work will sell, and then it is stressful.
Yeah.
But then we may have a next show where it makes up for it. So there have been a lot of times where it's like, oh shit, I don't know how I'm going to clear my bills this month. What will we do next month? And then things have just worked out. So and then I stopped my consulting. Now I'm doing method full time since the last 2 years.
I mean, definitely you're doing it full time. You guys
Yeah,
have
I
one
mean,
exhibition after the other.
yeah. So now it's full time, and I think we've just built a really good support system.
Yeah.
Where we do now have
People like Anika.
yeah, we have,
Yeah.
and so I think it's just like also grown organically, where it started with a few people who really believed, I think, in what we do, not necessarily just the art we present, and for them to then support us through whatever ways, right? So whether it's spreading the word, whether it's collecting works from us, I think it's been twofold, right? I think sometimes someone may really like the work, but I think sometimes someone may just say, hey, I think this is important. Let me pick up a work that might be at an accessible price point, because it's going to help the artist and the gallery to keep doing what they do. So I
100%.
think that's a very important mindset, um, that maybe exists in the art world. Maybe more of it should exist as well. I don't know. But I think things for us have worked out because of that. So I think like a small group of people who've been supportive, and then them telling other people about it, and I think people just buying into what we are trying to create as method.
So I bought, I made Agni, my brother, buy the pieces for my mom. I remember there was a Gaza around like, and now it's been such a long, like, genocide over there that I don't know when this was, but I remember there were some artists from Gaza that you were showcasing their work, and the proceeds were going directly to the artist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and we bought a few of those.
There was
works as
some.
well.
There was a set of like 10, 15 prints that you were selling
Yeah, so
together.
that was, I think we did that show last I want to say February.
Hmm.
So it was, I think, like maybe 3-4 months after 7th October's
Yeah.
version of the genocide, and it was a Palestinian artist who makes collages, and I mean, everyone in Gaza is trying to raise funds right now, right? So we managed to like figure a way for him to send us some print files, and we did small size prints, and everything went directly to him,
Directly.
right?
In fact,
So
I think the payment
the
also
payment
was
also was
directly-
going to him. So
yeah.
there was a GoFundMe link set
Yeah.
up for him, and so we were doing the prints at our end
Yeah.
locally over here, but all payments were being directly sent
Yeah.
to the fundraiser, and those prints are still available. So if anyone wants to get the prints, just hit us up on Instagram and we can arrange for them. And then I mean, even outside of the arts, we've just been doing fundraisers. I think pretty much every month we've been doing a fundraiser, which now has extended beyond that one Palestinian artist,
Hmm.
where we have like, every time we've done it, we've had 10 to 15 Indian artists who'll just contribute their works, right? So it could be a drawing, it could be a painting, it could be a sculptural work, and we run it the same way. Payments go directly to fundraisers, and now we've expanded it. I think like every time we do 3 or 4 fundraisers, so different people can get funding, so you're supporting more families as well. And it's been amazing to just see the artist community come in for that, and then the collector community really come in
Because
for
you have those
that.
thrift sales.
Yeah,
Which
yeah.
reminds me, take my bag
fundraisers
of
for
clothes that I have
Gaza.
put aside for
Yeah.
your thrift sale.
What
Yeah.
happens
I'll
here?
take it.
So yeah, I mean, he would be able to explain better. But so there was the Gaza exhibition. The future will remember. Then there was the print sale of that one Palestinian
Yeah.
artist. Then there was the artist community from India getting together and submitting an artwork of theirs, where the proceeds would go to multiple families.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And then there was a thrift sale, right, where people are sending clothes, shoes, and everything. So even brands are sending great, like Veg Non-Veg was sending a pair of shoes, and some other clothing brands were sending clothes, and then people will come and buy them. So a bazaar was set up, and people would come and buy them, and that would also go to like Palestinian families. So yeah, this time I've
Yeah.
actually set aside a huge bag of clothes for them to take to Bombay to sort of sell for that.
And does this, I mean, so of course I was interested in this conversation because of Gaza, because it's such a, I mean, I guess it's a conflict that is relevant to all of us, no matter where we are
Mhm.
in the world and what our context is. But does some of this also translate to like a more Indian context? Like, has there been fundraisers like this maybe for causes that are more
We've
local or not yet?
we've not done fundraisers, I think, for causes that are local, but we've been active about a lot of
Hmm.
things, right? So when CA and RC happened, we did an open call for it. So it was amplifying the things about that. I think a lot of the shows we've done have talked about the socio-economic situation here.
100%. Yeah.
But I think when it comes to like fundraising, you can also like focus your efforts on only so many things at a
Yeah.
particular time. So it's not about what's more important than the other, but it's also what can we dedicate our efforts to. Also, for a lot of things that are happening in India, we felt that there's enough NGOs over here, or enough local bodies here, or enough initiatives already happening over here that are working towards helping them.
Yeah.
So, and for us, it was just, we wanted to be active about what's
Yeah.
happening in Gaza, and that's so even beyond the shows and the thrift stores and all. We've had workshop hosts who are coming and doing workshops where the proceeds go there. In Method Bandra, we do community dinners, which are small, sit down, 10 people dinners. And you'll have chefs saying, you know what, I'll cook the meal, cover the ingredients, all proceeds can go towards Gaza. So I also think what's happened in a really interesting way is a lot of people who've wanted to help with the situation
Yeah.
are now reaching out to us and saying, hey, can I do this? And I don't mind all the proceeds going there. Even if it's at a really small scale, it could be like, okay, maybe on that evening we raised $80.
Yeah.
But it still makes a difference,
Of
you know. And
course.
I think when people start thinking of it that way, that okay, $80 may help a family with a meal for a day, it's still important. Um, More of that needs to happen. You know, and a lot of people reach out to us to do those kind of things.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about an extension to Getty's question, because obviously I have been very observant of the programming, not only of your gallery, but all the other galleries and all the other arts institutions around the country, around South
Mhm.
Asia. But what fascinated me was there were there is a body of work that Method has been doing that has been impacting the local, your local, impact zone. For example, last year in the most brutal summers that India faced, you started the Umbrella Art Project,
Mhm.
right? Tell me a little bit about that, and then I would also like for you to speak about, um, you work with
Mhm.
emerging artists that sometimes are showing their art for the very first time. A lot of these artists require support from the galleries. A lot of galleries do offer support in terms of grants, residencies,
Mhm.
but there are a lot of invisible support also that galleries offer to people who immediately come to them. So tell us, in terms of that, what does a gallery like yours, who works primarily with the upcoming artists, with the emerging artists, with the artists of our times, the artists that we will see become the bigger artists of the future, how do you go about that support?
So the first question I think about like social impact and the Umbrella Art project that we did last year. To be honest, I think the idea just started with um, me thinking it would be fun to get my favorite designers to design umbrellas, because you see them doing really cool graphics and you look at like an everyday common object or a product and you're like, okay, like how could we make that more interesting? Um, but I don't think that was enough for us to take the initiative to actually go through production and things like that. It needed to just matter a bit more than something cool and functional. And then we decided to um, make it a social impact cause, I guess, right? Because you look around and not just the rains, but also the summer, you have all your street vendors, street workers who are out there with no shelter
The
on their head,
hawkers, yeah.
Yeah.
the hawkers, right? So then we said, hey, for every umbrella that we produce for individuals, which would be sold, we'll also make one that we donate to a street vendor. So we had 5 artists last year contributing designs, and yeah, and we ran it that way, and the response was amazing. People loved it. The vendors loved it, so it went really well. This year, things have been busy with us, so I don't think we'll be doing a version of that this year, but I think hopefully next year we'll
Yeah.
get back to
And
that.
who were those artists? I always insist on galleries always taking the name
So
of the
the
artist so
artists
that they're
were, we
recognized for their
had
work.
we had Kunal Gaur, we had Ruining Magazine, Zara Baldiwala, we had Tusid from Bombay, we had Ashna Malik from Delhi, and we had Anirudh Mehta, the Big Fat Minimalist, and we also just had the Method cat glyph logo that we have
Yeah, Method is
as one
obsessed with
as
kitty
well.
cats. It's a Bombay thing.
It's a Bombay thing, yeah.
We are cat people, but now I'm becoming a dog person as
That's
well.
what
Yeah, yeah.
Delhi's rubbing off
But
here.
talk a little bit about
So
how
I
you
think
support
the
artists. Yeah.
support thing, it's something that we're still figuring out, and I think also it changes depending on where and what stage the artist is, and what kind of support they need. So I think right at a starting point, I think the way we look at it is, um, we exhibit and create space for artists even if they're really young, even if they're still maybe in art school, right? Which I think is the first step, because um, I think it just gives them the confidence, right? I think you can question what validation should be there, should not be there. But I think for a 20, 21, 22-year-old artist, for their works to be presented in a gallery is extremely meaningful, to just give them the confidence to keep doing what they're doing, and maybe even to take the practice in a direction that they want to take it in, because they're still figuring things out. They're still young. They might still be raw, but it's about looking at their practice and saying, hey, I think there's something unique or interesting and very authentic happening here. So let's put it out there. So I think one is that, right, just exhibiting it from that sense. And then I think the second thing really is, because we don't work on a traditional representation, long-term exclusivity model with most artists, a lot of the support comes from conversations, but then we do have enough artists who reach out to us when they're struggling to just continue doing their work, right? So then it becomes, okay, can we support them in the form of materials? Can we maybe help them find space? Sometimes they may not have exhibited with us, but can we help them find collectors for their works? That helps them keep running their practice. So a lot of those things happen with some of the artists who we have worked with maybe slightly longer and been part of their journey, maybe done one or two exhibitions with them. Other opportunities do come up where then funding support does become even more important, right? So maybe they get the opportunity to create a large installation, for example, or they want to experiment with something in their studio. And then that's where, really, as a gallery, we come in and say, okay, we think that's an interesting direction, and it's important to do this. So either we'll help you do it ourselves, or we'll then reach out to our extended support system and say, hey, this is something important to come in and support, and I think that's kind of how it's worked out. Also, like, I think with a lot of people, it's also just the conversations, the mentorship that maybe sometimes we can't give, but other people can give. Like, there's a bunch of times I've reached out to Anika and said, hey, can you do a call with this artist once a month? Just to give them like feedback on their portfolio, some of their new works, what they've been doing. Maybe also because their practice is more aligned with what Anika may be into than what I may be into. So I think a lot of it is just kind of in that scope and
But I
realm
want
over
to
there.
contextualize one of the things that he said, which is very important, is because sometimes when artists seek support, when they're upcoming artists, the market does not allow for the pricing of their artworks to be very much. They have to be low. Now, in that, the gallery also takes a commission, the artist also takes some money, some money goes into marketing and all of that also. So, most often, some artists have day jobs.
Yeah.
And then on the side, they're being an artist. But galleries like Method and galleries who are supporting emerging artists sometimes say, your practice is so important, it should exist, it should speak, it should have a dominant voice, that we will pay you what salary you were getting at that job.
Okay.
Okay. Or we will give you some additional financial support, but you need to become a full time artist. Sometimes what also happens is artists now paint could be of any quality, right? But sometimes artists have such amazing skill, but they can't afford the paint. I mean, one of the artists one day was telling us that one tube of red paint costs 19,000, but that paint is so superior that it stands the test of time. So sometimes they need that kind of support. So supporting an emerging artist group, that contextualization is sort of very important as to whether you help them with their grants and residencies and all of that. And then representation is also something that one needs to understand. When a gallery represents you, that means you have exclusive rights over that
Yeah.
artist. Now, gallery can't have the same artist do exhibitions throughout the year. Once a year you'll have that exhibition, and maybe in some group shows you'll put that same artist, but you can't overexpose that
Yeah.
artist also. Value of a thing increases when there's exclusivity of that thing. Now, all said and done, to take a call that I will not represent you, but I will give you the freedom to explore everything, is also letting go of an artist, right?
Yeah.
So these are like really big sort of ethical, moral stands that one takes, and kind of gives out from their own pocket when you're supporting an emerging art market. So, I think people who also support, and collectors and patrons like you and I, we buy emerging artists now. I mean, we've seen people from our parents' generation collect artists of their times who now
Yeah.
have become the stalwarts,
Exactly.
the modernists that
Yeah.
are breaking all records in the auction market.
I
But
always consult with Anika. I'm like, is this going to be a good investment?
but when we start supporting this emerging market, these artists do grow. So that contextualization, I just wanted to make.
I also just want to like throw this back to like how I first heard of you.
Mhm.
I remember Anika was involved with India Art Fair at the time, and you were really excited about bringing this gallery to India Art Fair, Method, right? That's how I'd heard about Method for the first time. You were like, we need to bring this gallery, but we need someone to fund this gallery.
Mhm.
So I was like, what does that mean? Like, don't people just pay to be at India Art Fair? So what do you mean fund this gallery? And that's when you brought that point up that look, we really like I believe in this gallery. It's a new gallery. It's doing disruptive work. I want them at India Art Fair, but they don't right now. It's not a priority for them to put in the money to get a
They're
stall
too
or
young
whatever.
to
They're too
fund it for
young to fund it
themselves.
for
Yeah.
themselves. So you find a patron
Hmm.
in the industry who is able to bring a gallery like this to a fair like that can give them the mileage and the visibility and all of that. So why I'm bringing this story up is that a few years have passed since that incident
Mhm.
or since that like sort of um, landmark occasion where I first heard of you through Anika. And now over the years, you've gotten so involved in Method. I think you've curated a
I've
number of
curated one
you've
show with
curated
She's
them.
one
curated
show.
one
Yeah,
show.
the
One
one in
show only.
Delhi,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think, like the one in the Delhi gallery.
Yeah.
And I mean, now the two of you, a friendship has emerged out of it as well.
Yeah.
How has Method grown in the last few years?
We are not friends. I'm his slave labor. Okay. He treats me like a housekeeper.
Anika is an honorary member of the Method team.
Yes.
But I mean, like, she's curated one show, but Anika has been just involved in the functioning of Method, a lot of like important decision making at Method, just being even a mentor for us, right? Because she's been in the art industry way longer than us. Like we've been in the art industry since the day we started Method, and that's it.
Yeah.
Nothing before that, right? So I think just a lot of like figuring shit out is where Anika has been super helpful, and then
Okay, let
she
me let
curated the
me
first show.
frame this question differently. We don't need to sing praises about Anika. Neither you
Yeah,
nor I want to
please.
do that. But the reason why I bring up this question is I want to like sort of reflect on how much the space for emerging artists has grown in India
I
since
think the
that period of
space,
time.
I kind of, feel the space has always existed.
Hmm.
Um, it's just not been part of the organized art industry, and Anika can correct me
Yeah.
if I'm wrong, because like I've even discovered some artists through collectors who've picked up works from school and said, hey, I think you should look at this guy. So I think one, with the internet, that's changed a lot, because as much as you want, you can't gatekeep
Yeah.
an artist anymore. You
Yeah.
can't keep them hidden. You can't keep talent hidden. Everyone is online. Every artist is online. Every creative person is online. And anyone who's half inclined to it can start finding artists, at least whose work they like. When
Yeah.
you're working with young emerging artists, there's no guarantee that it'll go up, it won't go up, right? But the thing is, the prices are so accessible, you don't have to look at it as an investment.
Yeah.
If you're buying a painting for 30,000, 40,000 rupees, you're not really breaking your head so much, oh, will it appreciate? Will I lose this money? So the lens at which you look at it from and acquire it also starts to change, because you're like, hey, I like that work. I want to put it up in my living room. It's 40,000, 50,000 rupees. I can just pick it up.
Yeah.
And I feel that market has always been there. It's just starting to get more accessible and approachable now, and for us, because we work with young emerging artists and we've decided to keep it that way, we also said, hey, I want to put art that I can afford to buy, right? And
Yeah.
there's a limit to that, which means most of our art is under the 2.5 to 3 lakh rupee price point. So most of our collectors are not old school collectors, right? We've had a lot of people who've bought their first artwork from Method and then they continue buying art from us, which is amazing to see, because now they have a gallery that's a little accessible. Also, what it does is, okay, now they have the ability to see the work.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I can actually come to the exhibition and see it. Oh, I can talk to a gallerist about it. I can get the context on it. Sometimes it's easier to talk to a gallerist than even an artist, right? So I think that's changed. It's just more accessible now
Yeah.
as opposed to maybe like 10 years ago, 12 years ago. And that's kind of just helped us grow and now run two spaces.
And do you agree with that? Do you think like the space has always been there, and it's like, because the reason why I bring this up, Anika, is also like you were one of the people who initially even like noted that Method was doing something different and something relevant, right?
Yeah.
And I think you started with just one space in Kala Ghora, and now you're in Delhi, in Kala Ghora, and in
Mhm.
Bandra. So you have grown in a fairly short period of
In
time.
that sense, yeah,
In
I
5 years, yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, and I think for us it was, and now we're only 5 years, right? So
Hmm.
we are still not like an old business or
No.
anything.
Yeah.
And um, we realize that, listen, there are a ton of emerging artists out there, right? Whose work we like. When you have one space, we can only do maybe 6 shows a year, maybe 7 shows a year.
Yeah.
So how many artists can we really show, right? And then you're slotting things like 2 years later, a year later. So a second space was okay. When you look at the numbers, it does add up, but it's worked out for us in the past,
Yeah.
So I think part of it is a leap of faith that, hey, I think if we just keep doing this, we will manage to sustain and keep this going. And I think so far it's been fine,
It's been
Yeah.
fine, yeah.
you know.
No, but I do. I think one of the main reasons why I believed in Method was there was a space that was giving such a platform to emerging artists in such a focused way. What happens is that most galleries are blue chip galleries, right? Running an art gallery, you want to make sales that are record breaking. You want to sell art at a premium. It caters to a very certain segment, right? Now, India has that, every country has that certain segment, but look at the population of India. India has a huge middle class, India has a huge youthful population, and that population in this internet age loves the arts.
Yeah.
Like, we live in a gig economy, people collect. You don't go to people's houses and see empty walls anymore.
Yeah.
But is there a platform that is addressing and speaking to these people? Number one. So I saw Method doing that in a very focused way. Like, they were like, no, we are not going to be going the regular route that everyone else is doing. We are going to fill this gap that we are seeing. So that's where I believed in them. But more importantly, why I wanted to believe and I continue to believe in them is because of the artists. The emerging artists getting this platform and them making it so organized and actually devoting their entire financial infrastructure towards supporting that emerging market actually has given a lot of other institutions a good blueprint to start that as well. So since Method has started, I've seen several other institutions beginning to focus on the emerging artists
Artist.
in a greater way. In fact, at the Young Collector program where we introduced Method, that was the first. So India Art Fair had been doing Young Collector program before that. They'd done a couple of editions before that, but it was at a smaller scale. Their desire, India Art Fair's desire to expand the Young Collectors program, because of exactly what I just said, there's a huge market out there and there are lots of artists that can be impacted by it. So when I came on as a curator and I brought on Method, that was the mission there, that we need to support the infrastructure that is new, that wants to support the emerging, that wants to support the local, that wants to support the voices that are dominant right now. And I think that really has become something that is now very important to the arts landscape in India right now. And their expansion of coming to Delhi and doing larger shows and addressing so many emerging artists. I mean, they released when I was curating their Fresh Produce 2.0, they released an open call. We got over 1,000 applicants. We had to shut
Wow.
it down because we're like, how are we going to handle this?
Yeah.
But when we did get that, and then we finally showed 53 artists in that show,
Yeah.
our catalog was a 200 long page catalog,
That's
right?
crazy.
So
Yeah.
it was, and that was, most of the artists was their first show. So
Yeah.
it's
By the way, that was a great show. I
Yeah.
have to say,
Anika
guys.
curated it.
Yeah,
that was a
great
that was a
show.
cool show. But the platform that institutions like Method provide is really essential to the market. It's really essential to the economics of things,
Yeah.
because the art market will not sort of expand if we keep looking at the blue chip.
100%. Look at someone like me, right? Like I can't afford like any of your classic like artists. That's not happening. But I would still like to have like art. Like for instance, my daughter's room. When I wanted to put a piece of art, I bought that cute like Frida, the toy room. That's a
She
really
Oh
got it
yeah.
from
nice one.
Method,
Okay. Yeah.
the
From
Amritpal
Method, the
Singh.
Amritpal
The
Singh,
Amit
yeah.
Pal Singh
Which
print.
was
Yeah.
such a cute piece for her room, So absolutely, I agree with you. I think the economics of it is very important, and we need galleries like
Yeah.
Method
And
clearly.
I think like all of that being said, I do feel there is the investment aspect to it as well, right? Which I think people are noticing now because artists that we maybe showed in 2019 or 2020 back then, they might have been like super young, right? And now they're 2 3 shows in, so a lot of collectors are looking at their price increase
Hmm.
and noticing that, look, okay, these artists actually are appreciating.
Yeah.
They may not be at record breaking numbers, but when you look at an artist whose price has gone up like 4x in 2 years, suddenly you're like, okay, wait, I could have got that piece for like 20K and now it's for a lakh.
Yeah.
Maybe I should look at that space a little bit more and maybe invest in 5 artists,
Yeah.
and 1 or 2 of them may, which is kind of like traditional VC approach, right?
Yeah.
But why not look at the really young artists
Absolutely.
in
And I
that
feel like,
sense?
again, how Anika said it, like a lot of people from our parents or our grandparents' generation who
Yep.
have art in their homes, they were not buying the artist who was at a record breaking price. They were buying an
The
artist
artist
that
of
they
their
liked
time.
I
and
think
the
a
artist
lot,
of their
and I
time.
think just there's just so many different ways to look at it,
Yeah.
because a lot of people may want to buy a master because, oh, I own a master.
Yeah.
But then you have enough people who want to buy someone young because they want the question to come up of, hey, who's that artist? And then be the person who discovered them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that ego comes in different ways, if I can use that term for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, what side do they want to be on? And it depends on how you look at it.
Yeah.
But Sahil, I have a question. Outside your Method Delhi gallery,
Mhm.
you call yourself an anti-gallery gallery. What does that mean?
So anti-gallery was actually a term coined by Shireen. She called us the anti-gallery gallery a few
Could you
years
tell
ago.
people who are not from the art world who's
is
that?
is the gallerist for Kemold Prescott Road, which is one of the oldest, most respected galleries in the country. They've been doing amazing work, and Shireen is amazing as well. And it came not from the sense of, oh, we are against other galleries, but more in the way that we don't function like other galleries. That we don't follow the rules of how a gallery should work, or the way they should curate, or the way they should present themselves, or design the space, or what kind of events they do. And it was just a term she said in passing, and I kind of liked it. So yeah, so we kind of just made it our thing. It also keeps us true to ourselves, to keep not adapting to the industry and just staying true to who we are.
But that's seeped into your philosophy a little bit, right? So I just want to also talk about, I want to go back to the kind of support you give to artists who make difficult art, which is political art, protest art, and such. We live in a world where in this year itself, we have seen some artists, not visual artists, but like comedians, people who are poets, silenced,
Mhm.
right? How does an institution like yours, in this environment of where you need to watch your back, you need
Mhm.
to be careful about how this impacts civil society, of how it impacts law and order, still allow dissenting voices
Mhm.
to exist?
I think, like, it's maybe something we think about more than we did 5 years ago. Because earlier, when we started, we were like, look, we're going to do it. We're going to talk about it. but at the end of the day, we are an art gallery. Like in the bigger scheme of things, how much of a focus is there on an art gallery talking about dissent, right? It's not really going to everyone out there. But now it's a little scarier, right? When you see it happening with comedy and they go and break down a venue. Sure, comedy is more popular in a broader general sense than the visual arts, but a lot of our programming, not just with what we present in terms of on the walls, but a lot of the other things we do, like performances and all, do tie into that as well. So I think one, it's more for us to consider and keep in mind. But I think it just comes back to, is it important enough to do or no, right? And to exercise the right and the ability to speak up about it, because technically we do have that, so why not exercise it? And it really is about, I don't know, thinking about what's the worst case scenario and how bad is that, you know?
I mean,
And
the worst case scenario is quite bad, but hopefully you
yeah,
never
but
have to know what it
like, is
is.
it bad enough to not do it? I
Yeah.
don't know. And up to what point can we get away with it? And um, yeah, we think about it and then we choose to ignore it.
Fair.
Yeah,
You're
I mean,
still, I mean, that's,
just a bunch of protesters entering and breaking your venue. I mean, a bad rainfall also could do that, right?
I mean, okay.
Yeah, I'm saying worst case scenario. Yeah, we put up a show. It's dissent, it's protest, and people who don't agree with it come in. They break some walls. Our walls are already broken in Delhi. They maybe damage some art. It's not the end of the world, right? I
So
think.
I have an incident to share over here, which is like today's news, right?
Yeah.
So there is a very prominent and India's most celebrated modern art gallery called DAG Modern. DAG Modern had a Hussain exhibition.
I saw
A
that.
Delhi
Yes.
High Court lawyer one day entered an exhibition. By the way, let me just set some context here, all
Yeah.
right? When you enter an art gallery, which is a secure space, generally the exhibition title, posters, everything is outside. And for one of India's most important, most vocal, most talked about artist, Hussain, you kind of know what you're entering into,
Yeah.
right? So essentially when you're entering a secure location, which is not a very public area where most often you'll enter an art gallery, you're the only person there. It's not
Yeah.
like the general janta is just like, oh, let me just have a gander over here and
Yeah.
walk about. So you enter with your consent. Once you enter with your consent and you're looking at the artworks, if something disturbs you, you are free to walk out, right? And it's in a closed door space. It's not like it's out on the open, all right, like a poster in the street. Now, this High Court lawyer filed a petition saying, oh, this is against Indian religiosity and such. As of today, the courts ruled you need to expand your mind to understand art, because this, according to the courts were saying that, and the lawyer in the court was saying that when you need to understand art, you need to understand the broad spectrum of how expression in the visual art exists, right? So having said that, in a world where voices need to exist and you have the freedom to walk out, and that really isn't so much into the public domain.
Look, I feel like this is definitely a more complicated conversation because it's like, I agree with you, firstly. I completely agree with you where I stand. But then you have like sentiments and et cetera at play. But I think what's important to take away is that art is a form of expression, right? And I think like for our generation, and I want to bring us back to this, I want to not end this conversation without touching upon like the CAA protests. Because I think that was, and you wrote on it, Anika, like on the art that was used as a form of resistance. I did
Mhm.
an article for Al Jazeera on art as a tool of political resistance. And you also mentioned it right now of how
Mhm.
Method did some work during the CA protests. And why I bring that up is because it was really seeing in our time, while we were like seeing a political situation play out in our country, that the resistance, in addition to people being there physically, raising their hand, putting it, doing the like sitting in over there in Shaheen Bagh, you also saw the resistance take on a very visual language. We were all sharing like graphics and illustrations that artists
Mhm.
that felt passionate about it were like putting up on Instagram or elsewhere. We were sharing those as a method, like as a mark of our solidarity. There was so much art that had come up at the protest site, right? And
Libraries, art, walkways that were completely covered in graffiti that were had one unifying message throughout. This is a peaceful protest.
yes. And I feel like there is that power of that like visual language, right? Like, and I'm curious to know whether, I don't know, whether like Shaheen Bagh and like the CA protests were like a one off, or like are we still seeing a lot of political activism in the emerging artists today? Because fear is also, I'll tell you why I said this. Sorry, I'm rambling a little bit, but when we started The Citizen, I also didn't have that much fear. I was like, oh,
Hmm.
what's going to happen?
Yeah.
Over 10 years, the fear has compounded. It has like, now I'm like less, I don't know, like less inclined
I
to really
mean,
say
maybe you also
anything.
have more to lose, right?
Yeah,
Like, I mean,
100%.
having run
Yeah,
it for 10 years,
yeah,
it's bigger than what it was back then. It's
yeah,
got more to it. So there's just more on the line,
yeah,
like to do that. And again, it's not something we've really thought about from a method perspective.
yeah,
Um, just because you see that happen a lot, right? With those voices being silenced in general, like, hey, we're not going to show that. Or to a degree, can you be more subtle about it, right?
hmm,
Sometimes you can't be subtle about politics, right? Or a lot of galleries do show political art, right? We are not the only gallery that will do protest art or political art, but most galleries also are fairly quiet when it comes to what they put online, what section of the of the non-traditional art public that they'll invite into the gallery, whereas we go all out, right?
yeah,
If we're doing a show on something, we will make it a point that as many people far and wide know that this is happening and they have the opportunity to come and see it. So it does get more eyeballs, which potentially does result in more risk, but there are a lot of artists creating it, right?
yeah. And that's what
and
I wanted
and
to ask you
and as
guys
a
is,
space, you like, at least for us, we just feel it's important to show that, right?
hmm,
Like, why wouldn't you? I mean, there's enough happening in the world and people can pick their causes. For a lot of galleries, I know the bigger concern isn't, oh, will there be a public fallout? Will someone come and break my walls or break the paintings? The reason they won't do it is because they may lose collectors that disagree with those politics,
yeah,
right?
Mm.
Someone may have business interest to just say, hey, you did a show that supports this minority, but I have political allegiances to the opposing party. So, you know what? I can't come to the gallery. I can't support you anymore. Thank you. Goodbye. I'm going to move on.
exactly.
And that's a bigger loss for the traditional art gallery ecosystem, right? Which again, for us, it didn't matter,
Hmm,
right? Because we didn't have that traditional collector base, right? We started from scratch and ground zero. So there are artists, young, old, emerging, non-emerging, creating those works all the time. You
yeah,
know, the only reason this question is coming up is because not a lot of galleries will present them.
yeah. I think that's an important, and that's
Yeah.
also, I guess, reassuring to know because at the root of it, art is often political.
Yeah.
Art is political, and kind of like coming back to a few questions and answering them together. I think um, also like, what is the intention and purpose of the space itself, right? Like, if we looked at method as, hey, this is a business for us, we are in this to make as much profit as we want to make, we wouldn't have done half the shows we've done.
Yeah,
We maybe wouldn't have been focusing on the emerging arts to the degree that we focus on. Maybe I wouldn't have done the arts at all, and I wouldn't be sitting here and doing it. So I think a lot comes down to just what's the intention.
yeah,
Like, even from an artist perspective, right? If an artist wants to make money, he can make pretty paintings. He
Yeah.
doesn't have to choose dissent and politics and resistance, and
Mm.
he can choose to ignore that side of him. But enough artists cannot, right?
Yeah.
Like, there is something that's more important to them than the next check.
yeah.
Tell us a little bit. We can't close this episode without asking this question. Who are your artists?
Who are our artists? I mean, we've
Who
worked
are
with.
the artists that Method has worked with? We know that you don't get into the traditional representational exclusive contracts, but now I do understand that there have been some artists that have been more loyal to you and shown with you over time. So tell us some of the artists and tell us a little bit about their practices that you have worked with.
So yeah, I think naturally over 5 years, we've just connected with some artists as people more than maybe some other artists, with either their practice or who they are or whatever it may be. And it's kind of like an unwritten thing where we just keep working together, you know. So Kunal Gaur, for example, who we showed in 2020, who's from Delhi now in Toronto, is someone who we've done two exhibitions with. We have a third one coming up. His background is in graphic design. He didn't study like in an art school and any of that, but he's completely moved into now a fine art practice. So exploring material assemblages, themes of the future, a lot of branding, packaging, identity approaches are in his practice as well. Another artist is Mohammad Imtiaz, whose work touches on everyday protest.
That was our
Hmm.
wedding.
Um,
He was our wedding gift to you, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's
Yeah.
one of my
yeah.
favorites.
Yeah.
So Mohammad
Mm.
Imtiaz, we've been doing, we've been working with for the last 3-4 years. Some of the international artists we worked with, like Dembski in India, we work pretty like he works only with us right now. We've done a solo with him. We showed him at Art Fair. We have Rohan Joglekar from Goa, Ashna
Who's a
Malik from
surrealist
Delhi,
artist.
yeah, who does surreal paintings. Ashna, who plays on the ideas of perception. Um, Gargi Chandola, who's doing amazing miniature style works, but that touch upon themes of feminism. We've done a show with her. We're going to be doing one more with her soon enough. So yeah, these are some, and I think with them, what's happened is we've done a show, we've been through that, and now it's okay. Let's do something again. So even when you look at our program, I feel like we have group exhibitions and solo exhibitions like every gallery, but I think the solo exhibitions, just because you spend a lot more time with the artist looking at their practice, because for a group show it might be okay, cool, I'm picking one work, maybe two works from you. When you see a solo exhibition happen, that's where we've really got to know them even as people, not just artists. And there's just a lot of alignment at an individual level over there, right, with the
Yeah.
way they think, with their practice, with us kind of understanding the authenticity of their practice. And then you get to know them, right? And then there's, I think, a relationship that builds from
As
there.
a curator, I've seen a lot of artists who did their first few exhibitions with you rise to great heights right after you. Avni Rai, and several artists who went
Mhm.
on to very prestigious fellowships and such. One more thing I want to ask, and this may be a little controversial.
Mhm.
Have you noticed in the visual arts, uh, lots of emerging artists, lots of emerging literary agents, poets, writers,
Mhm.
speakers, influence artists? Has there been any kind of plagiarism or any kind of um, sort of lack of credit that this industry has kind of seen, and then an internal silencing of artists, that maybe has happened?
Um, I mean, it does happen. Um, you see things, you hear things. Sometimes you notice something that's been used in a work, and you know who may have um, written it or done a version of it, and you can check in and get the background context. But I don't know how often it happens, because I think one, you have to be familiar with both sides of the spectrum, right? Like across different mediums. But yeah, it
but
does
also
happen.
but also
Um,
one of the things that, a long time ago in the art world, we noticed there was a page called Heard and Seen,
mhm,
right? Heard as in herd mentality,
yeah.
and seen as in don't make a scene,
Mhm,
right? But in that, several people were rising up in the art world and were responding to misconduct
mhm.
and standing up to power.
So it was like an anonymous
It was an
tell-all.
anonymous page
Okay, yeah.
that was later taken down with great force
Okay. By
of
whom?
some of the accused
Okay.
artists.
Hmm.
And that prevails in every world.
Yeah, in every
The
industry.
corporate
Yeah.
world, that has been more
Mhm,
notoriously stripped of that nature, and the art world, of course, in the international art world as well, where you see fantastically famous architects who design the most fantastic museums be pulled down by misconduct of
mhm.
some nature or whatever. And in the art world also, it's happened. Now, because you work with emerging artists, what can institutions such as yours do to safeguard artists and to be there for artists, to create support systems that can help them in the future?
I think I mean, I've not really thought about that so much. Um, but I think there's two, three different ways to look at it, right? So one is, let's just look at it as the first issue of copyright that you brought up, right? Um, I believe if your work has been plagiarized, um, to take it up, to put it out there, right? To protect your right, and not just take an attitude of, oh, that person is bigger than me, so it's okay, and let it pass, right? I think if no one starts doing it, it won't really change. I think other forms of misconduct are like more tricky. And so let's say if it's sexual misconduct, for example, right? Like, I don't know if you need to tell the artist something about that as much as the accuser, right? I mean, otherwise, is it victim blaming? I don't know. Like how do you? I don't think that's got to do with the art industry. I think that's a general thing.
Yeah,
You
that's
know,
human to human support, like
it's
when
human to
someone
human
comes and they
support.
don't have the
So
means to sort of help themselves,
so
you
if something
extend
is
support.
so if something has already happened and someone comes to us, right? Then we help them in whatever way we can, right? So can we connect you to a lawyer? Can we connect you to whatever they may need, right, within our network? And that's got, again, nothing to do with the arts, right? I think like anyone hit you up and said, hey, this happened,
Yeah.
you would go out of your way to help them.
Yeah.
Anyway, what do you tell a young person to prevent that from happening? I don't know. I guess the best you can say is just, if you notice that situation arising, get away from it.
And also, do you think there's a
But it's
responsibility that galleries have? And I mean, you might not be in this position because you're still dealing with emerging artists, but let's say a gallery is showcasing the works of an artist that has been named for misconduct. Do you think the gallery has a responsibility to drop that artist, or do you think is that that is, I guess,
I
controversial
don't know
as
that
well?
that's
I
a
think I think dropping the artist may be like a little extreme, like as a knee-jerk reaction,
Yeah,
because there could be cases where maybe the gallery is not aware of it, right?
yeah,
But at least in that situation, do you actively take the measures to sort that situation out? Like, okay, hey, I didn't know that
yeah,
an artist I've shown has plagiarize something,
yeah,
but now it's come to my notice, right? How do I address that without trying to just shut it down, without trying to shut the artist whose work was plagiarized, without silencing them, right? How do you say, okay, I'm aware now? How do I make this fair for everyone involved? And then what systems and practices do you put in place to prevent that?
yeah,
Right? And that still is hard to enforce, right? I can still get every artist to like exhibit with us, right? To sign a contract or a disclaimer that says, hey, if the work is plagiarized, the gallery has been made aware of it, but maybe the artist is lying to us.
yeah,
Like, I don't know that either.
yeah. Yeah.
So to what extent is the gallery responsible for it depends on, did they know it and let it happen,
Hmm.
right? So I think like those measures just need to be taken.
Yeah,
And it could happen sometimes, right? Like I said, when we do a solo exhibition, we know the artist practice fairly well. If it's a group show, maybe we've had like 2 3 conversations with an artist, their work fits maybe a theme, and we put it up. We don't really know what they've done, right? If it's other misconduct that they've been accused of, I think then it's like, yeah, then you need to kind of look at it and maybe say, I'm not going to support that.
yeah,
Like we wouldn't,
yeah,
right? Especially if there was evidence of, let's say, an artist or anyone we work with, right? It doesn't have to be an artist, it could even be an employee,
yeah.
right? It could be maybe an external curator we work with, it could be a musician who has performed, right? Like, then it's just for us to say, hey, we are not going to work
Work
with
with you. Yeah,
with this person again.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's an important line to
And
take.
I do think like some galleries have taken that stand as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think this
Like
is a
I know of one show that immediately comes to mind that was taken off 2 days after it opened because the artist was accused of misconduct.
yeah,
That's so good to hear. That's
Yeah.
so good to hear that people still, besides the economics of everything, stand up
I think it
and
comes back to what's the intention with which you're running your space, right?
yeah.
If you want to run it as a business, you figure ways to work around it. Oh, let it die down, let it be quiet. Like, it just depends on what kind of space you're running and who you are as people. I think at the end of it, it just comes down to that.
Mhm.
all right, we're running out of time, so I think we can end on I have a question for both of you. Do you guys think that method and the kind of gallery you are, the anti gallery, would you call it disruptive to the Indian art market?
I don't like the word disruptive.
Hmm.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense
I
anymore.
feel it's used.
Used too
I
much.
think it's used too much, but I also think it's too calculated a decision. Like, oh, I'm going to be disruptive, and for the sake of that, I'm gonna be different, as opposed to I'm just gonna stick to who I am or who we are,
Yeah.
and then people can put whatever labels they want. So
So you're not trying to be disruptive, but if someone describes you as that, then you're like, okay, maybe.
I mean, people describe us as a lot of
Yeah.
things. Um,
People
this-
even critiqued you when you first opened. I
people critique
remember.
us even today.
Yeah, people critiqued you that they're not really a gallery. And now those people are the biggest fans of Method, you know? And I was just like, just wait. Look at what people are doing. But yeah, disruptive is an overused, misplaced term for an institution like this. But I would say, I mean, if I had to answer this question in terms of how I would describe Method,
Yeah.
I think Method is a gallery that is looking at emerging voices, a platform that is looking at not only popular culture, but is acknowledging the voices of our times and is heavily curating, a destination for those voices to exist in.
Amazing. Well, thank you, Sahil, for sort of joining
Thank you,
us. And
Gayati.
it's great seeing, I mean, as someone who's become really an armchair voice on everything, it's really inspiring and great seeing people do good work and achieve success with
thank
it.
you.
Yeah, it really is. And that applies to both of you.
Well, I told you I'm a slave labor. Yeah.
Sahil's not saying anything.
Thanks for joining us, Sahil.
Thank you, Anika. Thanks for
You're
having
welcome.
me.
Yeah.
All right.